Hola clase, today's our first day, hoy es nuestro primer día y hoy vamos a ver el tema Greetings in Spanish. So we're going to divide this topic in three. First we're going to see los saludos, that includes words or phrases that you use to say hi. Also las presentaciones, so that includes phrases or questions that you use to introduce yourself. And then las despedidas, which includes words and phrases that you use to say goodbye. Okay, los saludos, saying hi. So we're gonna see what words or phrases you can use in formal settings. But we're also going to see what words or phrases you can use in informal or familiar settings. We're gonna see more about these settings later in the video. So if you're in a formal setting and you want to say hi, you can use hola, buenos días, that means good morning, buenas tardes, that means good afternoon, buenas noches, that means good night. And then you have some other options if you're talking to your friends or in more like familiar settings, like you can say ¿qué tal?, ¿qué hay?, hola. Either of those three. If you want to ask somebody how are you in a formal setting, you usually use ¿cómo está usted?, ¿cómo está usted? And then these are some of the answers that you can give. Bien, gracias, good, thank you. Muy bien, bastante bien, más o menos, o regular. And then this is very important. So, when you ask back, you use ¿y usted? ¿Y usted? ¿Cómo está? So if you have, in informal settings, you can ask how are you using any of these phrases. You can say ¿cómo estás? You can ask ¿cómo estás? ¿Cómo vas? ¿Cómo te va? The same, you can reply bien, muy bien, bastante bien, más o menos, regular. But here's the important part. When you ask back, you use y tú. So you use the tú form in informal or familiar settings. And you use the usted form in formal settings. If we continue, we're going to see the introductions. So again, we have formal settings and we have informal or familiar settings. So if you want to ask somebody their name, ¿cómo se llama usted? And in informal settings is ¿cómo te llamas tú? Or ¿cómo te llamas? What is your name? And you can reply me llamo, mi nombre es, which is translated to I'm called, me llamo, mi nombre es, my name is. Or you can just say soy and your name. For example, soy Annie. Soy Annie. That's my name. When somebody tells you their name, you can reply like something like nice to meet you. So in informal settings, you usually say encantada if you're a female speaker, encantado if you're a male speaker. In informal settings, you can say mucho gusto, nice to meet you, mucho gusto. This one can also apply for formal settings, mucho gusto, but if you use encantada or encantado, that's usually just goes for formal settings. And then if you want to ask somebody where they're from, ¿de dónde es usted? And then if you want to reply, soy de, I am from, and the name you are from. So for example, me, soy de Guatemala, I'm from Guatemala. ¿Y usted? And you're asking back. In informal or familiar settings, you ask, ¿de dónde eres tú? ¿De dónde eres tú? Where are you from? Soy de, that's the same. I am from, soy de Guatemala, soy de Estados Unidos. ¿Y tú? And you, when you ask back. So you can see here in the familiar settings, again, you use the tú form, and in the formal settings, you use the usted form. Saying goodbye, las despedidas. In formal settings, you can say adiós, which is goodbye. And in familiar settings or informal ones, you can say chao. You can say also hasta luego, see you later. Or in informal settings, you can say hasta mañana, see you tomorrow, hasta pronto, see you soon, nos vemos, see you later. So we have these words and phrases. I would like you to rewatch this video and try to remember them, memorize them, repeat after me. Take some time to rewatch this video. So now we're going to talk about formal and informal settings or situation, las situaciones formales e informales. So for this I'm gonna talk a little bit about the personal pronouns. We're gonna continue seeing them in this week, but just to make a review of it. So in English we have I. In Spanish that's yo. In English we have you singular. In Spanish we don't have just one form of you singular. We have tú, usted, y vos. Then in English we have he, she, it, right? In Spanish we have él for masculine, for he, ella for feminine, for she, and we don't have a direct translation of it. Then in English we have we, that's translated in Spanish as nosotros for masculine, nosotras for feminine. In English we have you plural when you're talking to a group of people. In Spanish we use ustedes in Latin America, and in Spain they use vosotros and vosotras for you plural. Then in English we have they, and that's in Spanish is ellos for masculine, ellas for feminine. So as you can see, Spanish have gender pronouns, right? We have él, ella, nosotros, nosotras, vosotros, vosotras, ellos, ellas. It's something that English doesn't have. So what do you do when you want to talk about inclusive language in Spanish? We do have inclusive language pronouns. For these ones are, for example, ella, nosotres, vosotres, ellas. I have to say that these pronouns are not very widely used by native speakers, and they are not approved to use by the Real Academia Española, which is the Royal Spanish Academy, which kind of like regulates the use of the language. So the use of these pronouns are not accepted by some speakers and are not accepted by the Royal Spanish Academy, which I think is kind of like the same with when you use they singular in English. So some speakers use that, but it's not entirely accepted by all native English speakers. So that's the same with Spanish. And I just want to let you know that they do exist in Spanish. They're usually used in this way, and there are so many other ways of using inclusive language, and this is one option, which is changing the last vowel. So because you're learners of Spanish, I'm gonna recommend you the following. So if you use them in this class setting, right? So I'm already showing you this, so I know that you will know about them. You use it outside. Just be mindful that there are some speakers that maybe they don't know them or they don't accept them. If you use them for this class, please make it intentional. So make because they can be seen as mistakes. So if you use them, just make it obvious that you are conscious, that you're aware that you are using them as inclusive language. And just know that they are not entirely accepted by the native speakers. And some of them maybe probably have not heard of them. But if these ones are they are usually used in social media. So you will see them also being used. That was my note about inclusive language if you want to know how it works in Spanish. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the you singular Spanish pronoun. We have three: tú, usted, vos. And the use of them varies from country to country. But I'm going to talk about the generalities. And we're not going to see the vos form. We're just going to see the tú and usted. So in most Spanish-speaking countries, the usted pronoun, abbreviated as usted, and conjugations of the verbs in the usted form are used with people we don't know well in formal situations. So for example, students to professors, for older people you don't know well, usually what happens, but it's not always the case. In some countries like Colombia and Costa Rica, the usted form is actually used for friends and family. So note I'm just giving you generalities, but if you go to different countries, you will see the use is a little bit different. So in most Spanish-speaking countries, the tú pronoun And conjugations are used in familiar settings. That means for friends or family, when you're talking to your sister, your brother, your parents, and your friends. And now the vos is a pronoun used in many Spanish-speaking countries like Argentina, Uruguay, Guatemala as a familiar form to use with friends. So we're not going to see the vos form in this course. We're just going to see the tú and usted. I just want you to know there are some exceptions. It's not like tú is always familiar and usted is always formal, but those are the generalities. So you can try to remember that tú is used for informal or familiar settings, and usted is for formal settings. So we're going to do a practice. You have to say tú or usted. So what would you use in the following situations? Is it informal or is it formal? So for example, when you're meeting a new classmate, will you use the tú form or the usted form? Will you use it for informal or formal? Usually when you are meeting a new classmate, you are in an informal setting, you're in a classroom, and you would probably use the tú form. Okay, are you ready for number 2? If you're greeting a new professor for the first time, so know about the context. You're greeting somebody, if it's a professor, you would think it's somebody older, and you're meeting them for the first time. Will you use tú or usted? Well, it depends, as always. You can wait and see how your professor is greeting you, and then you know how to greet back. But probably it is a more formal setting, just because it's somebody that's older. So probably you would like to use more the usted form, or you can also ask them. Okay, number 3. You're seeing an old friend in the grocery store. Will you use the tú, the familiar form, or usted, the formal form? If you're greeting an old friend, probably that person is familiar to you. It used to be a friend, or maybe it's still your friend, so you probably will use the tú form since it's a familiar setting. We have 3 more. So imagine you ask a police officer for directions. Would you approach that person in the tú or usted form? So since you have never met that person before and you want to show respect, probably it's better to use the usted form. Number 5. You greet your friend's grandmother. Would you use tú or usted? Well, since grandma is an older person and it is not your grandma, it's your friend's grandma, then probably it's better to use a respect form, and that would be the usted form. Number 6, are you ready? Last one. Your friend introduces you to other friends. Would you use the tú or usted? Probably the new friends are the same age as you. Since it is a familiar setting, probably it's better to use the tú form. How did you do? Good? Okay, I'm just gonna add one more note. Politeness varies from culture to culture, right? The choose between tú or usted follows the norms of politeness. So, and the Spanish-speaking world is a big world, formed by so many different cultures, so many different countries, with their own diversities. They all have their own customs, and these customs also change over time. As we saw in some countries, the use of the usted form is not always formal, like in Colombia and Costa Rica. Another example is that in Spain, older people don't want to be talked with the usted form. It makes them feel old. So the use of the usted form actually in Spain have decreased. The best way when you don't know if to approach in the tú or usted form is to ask. So you can just ask, ¿prefiere tú o usted?